Hi, I'm Andy Smiley, the Friendly Podcast Guide. Every week, I put out an episode about a specific podcast to help you figure out if it's your next favorite podcast. Those come out on Tuesdays. I also put out another episode each Thursday that's a little more personal. Either a list of podcasts I like for the season we're in, how I'm using podcasts in my own life, or something like that. This is one of those episodes, and this week it's all about audio drama podcasts for kids. We all love a good story, especially kids, so I rounded up some of our family's favorite storytelling kid podcasts. If your kids are a wide range of ages, then I would highly recommend you try Circle Round. My 3-year-old likes the show, but also it's entertaining for me. So how's that for a range? Each episode is a retelling of a folk tale from around the world. The stories are captivating and a different person voices each character in the story, which makes it super engaging for kids and adults. A quick story about Circle Round. One day, our family was waiting in the Lowe's parking lot to pick up a new washing machine. Yay for new appliances. And of course, I turned on a kid podcast because that's what I do. And it happened to be a Circle Round episode. Everyone loved it, including Scott and I. And when the Lowe's employees brought out the washer to put in our van, Scott and I were super bummed that we had to miss part of the story. And I actually considered pausing the episode and making my kids sit in silence so that Scott and I wouldn't miss any of the episode. Don't worry, I didn't do that, but I did make my 5-year-old tell me what happened when we got back in the car. Each episode of Circle Round is about 20 minutes long, and I would recommend listening to the Friendly Podcast Guide episode about Circle Round, where I give details about the show and share a short clip to give you a feel for the vibe of the show. If you're looking for a more cinematic experience, I recommend Otter Space. This kid podcast started as a screenplay for an animated film. It's about 2 otters that end up in outer space and have to save Earth. This podcast is written for kids ages about 5 or 6 to 10. Each episode is about 15 to 20 minutes long, and there are 10 episodes in the first season. This story makes the most sense if you start with episode 1, Beginnings. The show goes in a specific order, so if you don't start at the beginning, your kids will be a bit lost. Before I tell you about more storytelling kid podcasts, we're going to take a quick break to talk about my guide to kid podcasts. One of my favorite parenting tools is kid podcasts. I use them when I'm running errands with the kiddos to keep them from complaining the whole time, or when I need a mom break, I'll just grab an easy activity like coloring pages or a sensory bin, turn on a kid podcast, and the kids will be entertained for at least half an hour. I know that kid podcasts would help you in your life too, which is why I made a guide to kid podcasts. There are 8 categories ranging from science to mindfulness to audio drama, with at least 3 podcasts in each category. There are 27 podcasts in total on the guide. I've listened to each of these podcasts, so I can attest to them being kid-friendly. And I put my email at the bottom of the guide so that if you try a couple with your kids and none of them are a good fit, you can email me and I will personally help you find a kid podcast that works for your littles and you. You can grab this guide at the link in the show notes. Story Pirates is a unique podcast because each episode moves the story of that season along, which is usually a silly piratey adventure that centers around the Story Pirate crew, and they get into all sorts of shenanigans. Within the episode, there are interludes of sketch comedy and songs that are taken from stories that kids send in. The episodes are about 30 minutes long, and it's written for kids that are elementary school age. You can start with any episode that strikes your kids' fancy, but if you want the whole experience, I would recommend starting at the very beginning, Season 1, Episode 1. I Love a Ghost / Fred the Carrot. If you can't tell, they name the episodes based on the songs or stories that they've taken from the kids that have sent in songs and stories. If your kids are anything like mine, then they are probably fascinated by space. If you can't tell from the early recommendation of Otter Space. Another great space kid podcast is called The Alien Adventures of Finn Caspian. Jonathan Messinger, the host, describes the show like this. The story centers on Finn Caspian, an 8-year-old boy aboard the famous Marlow 280 interplanetary exploratory space station. He and his friends Abigail, Elias, and Vale are Explorers Troop 301, taking off from the Marlow to explore uncharted planets, help the occasional alien, and solve a mystery that threatens to destroy the Marlow. This show is for elementary age kids, and I would recommend starting with the introduction episode, the one before episode 1, so that you can get all of the goodness from the very beginning. Audio drama podcasts are my favorite to use when we go on road trips as a family. So if you have any spring or summer road trips planned, I highly recommend downloading some of these podcasts to have when the whining begins during the drive. Also, if you're looking for more kid podcasts to help make your parenting life easier, grab my kid podcast guide to help you find a kid podcast that's a good fit for your kiddos and you. Talk to you soon. Famous Marlow 280 Interplanetary Exploratory Space Station. Okay, let's try that again. The famous Marlow 280 Interplanetary Exploratory. Okay,